Welcome to the KIMIYA Healing Podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about what you can do when you start to feel like you're getting stuck, you're not able to access your creative flow or build momentum, and if you've been in this place for quite a long time, then this is going to be really, really important for you to listen, digest, and see if you can take some of the action points on board. Now, you might find yourself in a place where you feel like you can't make a decision or you can't move forward until you know exactly what you're doing, until you know exactly how it's going to end and how it's going to plan out. And you end up not making any decisions. So sometimes we find ourselves getting trapped in analysis paralysis, where we're thinking so much and trying to calculate and figure out what happens next, and actually we end up doing nothing. So I found myself in places like this at points in my life, and the tips that I'm going to share with you are things that I've actually done myself. The first thing I'm going to talk about is why it's important to be really, really honest with yourself about whether you are feeling stuck. And often for people who have felt like this for most of their life, and if that's you and you're listening to this and you're like, well, yeah, I've been feeling like my life's not been moving forward for a number of years, then this again is going to be super important for you to be able to be honest with yourself and admit. Because we can't fix anything, we can't change unless we admit that there is an issue, that there's a problem. And that's probably the scariest step, to admit that you are stuck and you are feeling held back, because often we don't want to admit that to ourselves because it creates this kind of vulnerable feeling inside, or it makes us feel a certain way about ourselves. But this is really normal. It's part of our human journey, our human spiral. So let yourself accept it. And the second point I'm going to say is, don't shame yourself about feeling stuck. So often when you do feel this way, you start to think, well, I can't do anything, and you start to become quite defeatist, or you have a negative internal narrative. Then you start to feel all those feelings associated with the burden within, and it creates even more heaviness, even more density, even more stuckness. And when this goes on for a while and becomes a cycle, where every time you feel bad, you then feel shame for feeling bad, or every time you feel blocked or held back or stuck, you feel shame about it. What happens then is it becomes harder to change. It becomes harder to find solutions because you're busy in the shame cycle. You're getting stuck in an even deeper web. So the first step that you want to really do is accept that you are feeling stuck. Don't let yourself feel bad about it. Recognize it's a natural part of being human. And sometimes when we are feeling very stuck, we're actually being called to transcend our existing identity. We're being called to step out of what we've created and do something differently. And a lot of the time that requires us to step into a higher level of consciousness, i.e. to be more and ever more self-aware about what we've been doing that keeps us held back, and be willing to start to try new things in order to create a new cycle. So I like to always bear in mind that if I'm feeling stuck, it's an opportunity rather than the status quo. It's an opportunity for me to look within and ask myself, what do I need to do within myself in order to move forward? So you can imagine that a huge and vibrant landscape awaits you, a huge opportunity for you. But in order for you to really grasp that opportunity, in order for you to build the bridge to get into that space, you're going to have to do some work to accept where you are right now and take action to make the changes you need to make. And a lot of the time, this action requires very deep inner work, and we have to let the false and limiting beliefs that we hold about ourselves, we have to start to let them die. When we let these limiting beliefs die, what we're actually doing is transforming our identity. And the way that we do this is through heart alchemy, by bringing in those aspects which are holding us back, the things that we believe about ourselves, the things that we feel about ourselves and the world, or what we've been taught, and bringing that into the heart to really feel, how is this affecting me? Is this making me feel really, really small and disempowered? Well, how small and how disempowered? You're only going to really understand that when you let yourself feel it, when you feel the pain of that. When you feel that and you stay with it and you let yourself keep feeling deeper and deeper inside that, what happens is you will start to realize at an embodied level that actually it doesn't have to be like this, that you are capable of more. And the deeper you feel into that, the pain of how small you keep yourself, when you start to accept that and say, okay, I am actually capable of more, and this doesn't have to be me, and this shouldn't be me because it's really constricting, it's really restrictive, and it dampens who I am, then what you're doing through that process is actually alchemizing a deeper state of self-love. And when you do that, you cannot hold the same self-limiting belief in the same way in your heart and in your body, and it doesn't have that same power over you. So you end up naturally starting to take movements and actions and start having slightly different thought processes that then change your behaviors, and you end up leaving behind these self-limiting beliefs. And this is a process. It's not going to happen instantly, but it's going to start to happen over the course of a few days. And slowly you're going to start to build and create more momentum. So it's scary to do that for a lot of people. It's scary to recognize really how your identity and your beliefs and your thoughts and your past and the way that you're holding on to it is actually holding you back. But it's a really important step, and this requires your heart. You have to feel it. And this is where deep self-love comes from. Self-love is not just about, salt baths and light and unicorns and, saying positive mantras and affirmations to ourselves. Self-love is about really allowing ourselves to acknowledge and feel that we are worthy of more. We are worthy of feeling in a different way. We are worthy of interacting in a different way. And that is where deep self-love comes from, when those changes start to happen within us. So what happens if you don't do this? Well, if you don't, you stay where you are and you hold on because in your mind you just don't believe you're worthy of more. You don't believe you're capable of anything different, and your existing paradigm is giving you a lot of comfort or protection against having to go deeper and feel these aspects of yourself. Then actually what happens is, over time, you start to lose the capacity to believe in yourself, because the things that you do believe about yourself are painful. So it's very hard for you to suddenly start believing in yourself when your reality is one of pain or stuckness. So we stop believing that we can change, and when that goes on for a really long time, what happens then is we actually give up on ourselves. We give up on our divine essence. We give up on our life. We give up on change. We almost say, well, other people can change, other people can heal, but I'm different. I can't. And that is a state of ego. There's nothing humble or benevolent about that. It's a state of pure ego. And ego is fear, right? It's a state of being in fear. Now, the mind will try to take you into this place because the mind works really well to protect you from deeper feelings. And when those deeper feelings that live within you are trauma feelings and traumatized aspects of yourself, trauma memories, difficult and challenging emotions, then your mind will go through this process, and it will try its very best to convince you that you cannot change and you cannot be who you really, really are. So let me give you a few more tips on how to get momentum, how not to fall into this place of victim mentality, of dense ego identification, and how you can start to alchemize your own identity within your heart, within your womb space, and then start to transform yourself. So once you've accepted that you're stuck, write it down and let it sink in. Let it sink in for a few days, let it feel real to you, and let yourself get some perspective. Because when you're feeling stuck but you never admit it, you live the stuckness. When you write it down on a piece of paper, I feel really stuck in my life, I feel really stuck in my relationship, I feel really stuck in my marriage, I feel really stuck in my career, I feel really stuck in my body, as so many clients tell me when they have had traumatized childhoods and have experienced patterns of trauma in adulthood, they feel stuck in their entire body. And our bodies reflect the world. So we get stuck in our body, we get stuck in the world. So writing it down will help you to create some space. And when you get some space, you can start to work with it. You cannot work with something that you have zero space from. And this is the concept of detachment. You're not detaching, pretending it's not real, pretending it's not painful. You're giving yourself space to be a little bit more objective, a little bit more wise, a little bit more creative, to help you find your own solutions within yourself. So you might also want to examine where in your trauma history, or what in your trauma history has led to this pattern, the pattern of being stuck. And for some people that has come all the way from their birth experience, where they were perhaps stuck in the birth canal, or where they were separated from their parent or parents for a long period of time and felt stuck because they weren't getting the attunement and the contact and the love and the holding that they needed. So they essentially started to feel from a very young age stuck or bad or rejected. And then you want to go into those feelings and go, okay, along with feeling stuck, what are the main emotions? And what you'll notice come up are things like anger, frustration, despair, sadness. These are all emotions that are related to the experience of being stuck. So write them down. You might even want to rank the intensity of how often these emotions arrive and how intense they are when they're there. So if you're aware that you are feeling sad most of the time, you are feeling angry most of the time, make a note of that. It's going to help you to, again, get that space that you need in order to start processing. You might want to also check in with yourself about how often you do this. How often do you let yourself be really authentic and feel your emotions, feel your deeper reality, and then start to build a relationship with it? So a lot of the time, people will not do emotional processing work and not do self-examination until there's a crisis, or until they have to go into a healing program or go to see a therapist, and then that's when they'll start to do inner work. But actually, you want to be doing this all the time, especially if you want to create flow and momentum. You want to be always connected to your emotional world, always curious and inquiring about why you feel the way you feel, and then deciding, am I worth doing something about it? Because we've all had times when we feel really deeply hurt. But the difference between someone who heals and rises out of that, changes their reality, and someone who just carries that narrative throughout their whole life, well, it was just really hard for me, I feel really hurt, I feel really betrayed, life isn't fair, it's never been fair for me, etc., etc. The difference between those two people is the willingness to do something about it, the willingness to believe that they are worthy of doing something about it, right? And a lot of the people who don't feel worthy enough to do something about it are stuck in a victim identity and will find it very hard to reach out for support, to reach out for healing, to do shadow work, because it's easier to stay where you are. Even though it's painful, it's easier to stay where you are because you've got used to that level of restriction and it's now started to feel safe. It's the same as being in a prison. You live in a vibrational cage for long enough and that vibrational cage is going to start to feel very normal, very safe, and very necessary. And until you experience and let yourself feel the depth of the pain of the cage and then say, do I believe that I'm worth more than this, that I can do better than this? Until you let yourself have that very real, honest conversation with yourself and feel it, and it comes from within you, you will stay stuck. It's possible for every single one of you to change. It's possible for every single one of you to do this process and go inside and start to take some radical action towards getting unstuck. And if you are taking this on board and you are doing that emotional examination and you're asking yourself about when these emotions and incidents first began, how they made you feel, how long you've been carrying them around, when they show up, you might also want to ask yourself, especially if you're finding that you're doing this, well, nothing's getting resolved. I'm angry, I'm sad, and I've been like this for a while, and I know why, because I know my trauma, but nothing's really changing. I want you to then go into the next phase, which is to ask yourself, how do these emotions serve me? And you'll be very surprised at what comes up, because often the reason that you're still holding what you are is because these emotions are protecting you from deeper feelings. Believe it or not, it might feel very painful to be the way you are, to feel the way you are, but when you prolong that, the chances are you're protecting yourself subconsciously from feeling deeper levels and layers within yourself, which can be very excruciating to feel. I don't need to paint a picture that this is particularly glamorous or easy work to do. So I always ask my clients, if they're meeting a lot of resistance within themselves and they're finding that actually they're not able to process emotion, I will ask them very clearly, let's have a brainstorm about how these emotions are serving you. Because if something was not serving you at all, you would not keep recreating them. They give you something. These emotions feed you with something, and they're feeding you with something that you need. So understanding what they're feeding, first of all, accepting that they are feeding you something, then understanding what they're feeding you with, and then starting to understand what these needs are. So for example, I get a lot of clients that say they can't process or don't want to process the anger because it's protecting them from feeling very deep grief or from feeling very deep rejection, which they perceive is going to be totally heart-shattering. And when there is deep trauma there, and the emotions, sensations in the body have never been brought up to the surface, and they just live deeply within, they become ever more threatening. Every month and year that goes by, they become even harder to access and even more threatening. So the layers of protection through these other belief systems and emotions start to build up. You start to then feel like, well, it's better to be angry than it is to be in grief, because I don't know what that feels like and I don't know how I'm going to deal with that, right? So a lot of the time our belief systems are protecting us from uncertainty, from uncertain ground, from something that we feel is mysterious and unknown. And I think for human beings, the biggest fear is the fear of the unknown. The next step is to get really in touch with these needs. So your need to not feel rejected, your need to feel safe. In order to live in a healthy and harmonious way within yourself and within the world, you need to understand what your needs are, and then try to find ways that are not completely self-destructive and poisonous and toxic and that ruin you in the process. You need to find ways to get these needs met in a way that is actually effective and self-nurturing and healthy and balanced. So identifying where you first felt rejected, when it happened, how old you were, who was involved, and letting yourself start to really process, what your needs were at that point in time. And so many of you have been rejected as children, as babies. So some of the clients I work with have been rejected while they were in the womb. They were actually developing in utero, and either the parent didn't want them, they were conceived from rape, there was a lot of stress in the household, and the parent didn't know that they wanted to keep the child. This whole load of uncertainties, right? And a whole load of trauma, and the developing brain is actually starting to understand itself and build a model of itself through this template. So recognizing that your first experience of not getting your needs met might be when you were very, very young, and then the layers build up on top of that. Finding ways to acknowledge that you have these needs. You have a deep need to be accepted. You have a deep need to be loved. You have a deep need to be appreciated, to be seen, to be safe, to be trusted, to be adored. You deserve that, and you have a need that needs to be met. When you start to acknowledge your needs and validate them, it becomes very hard to feed them in distorted ways, because suddenly you're in touch with something a little bit softer inside you, a little bit more human inside you. Rather than wanting to protect yourself, actually, you really want to love yourself. You really want to feel safe within yourself. So going down into the needs level to recognize these needs. And this is where it's going to help you in your relationships as well, because when you do this, and say your partner also does this, or your friends also do this, you arrive at very, very common needs. We all have the same human needs to varying depths, of course. That's the degree to which we fell into our own self-worth. But we all have the same needs. And when you can connect based on a shared and honest, vulnerable need, you're having a different type of conversation. So families that I work with, I will often support them to go through this process where the parents actually start to connect then in a completely different way, because they realize that the hostility is not required. They have a need, their partner has the exact same need, and they start to co-create. And when they start to co-create as a couple to get their needs met together and individually, then what you're doing is you're creating something very, very beautiful. So I'm going to invite you into that exercise and see how it works for you. And feel free to reach out if you're doing this and you're like, okay, you're either finding you're getting to a certain place and you're getting stuck, or maybe you are actually finding you've got a huge process underway and things are starting to really move for you, then let me know. The other thing I want to share with you is flow and creativity and being a channel. All of this great stuff that you really want and that you really deep down you are, does require you to decide who you're not. And it requires you to decide that you're going to process the stuck emotions and the stuck pain in order to release and flow again. And the place where most people get stuck is emotional blockages. They don't know how to cry. They don't know how to scream. They don't know how to laugh. They don't know how to dream. It's all blocked up inside. Because when they have cried in the past, they've been abandoned. Or when they have cried, it's felt like it was going to go on forever because the grief was so deep. Or they were shamed. Or when they did scream, they were shut down. or they've been programmed to not even do it because in their household it was all very frowned upon. So allowing yourself emotional release, particularly for women, to learn how to cry. I'm not saying this is not important for men, but I'm saying women, we have a innate flow within us. We are here in the feminine energy. We need to dance, we need to move. And if we get stuck, it starts to become very hard to feel like a woman. It starts to become very hard to feel. And if we can't feel, we start feeling disconnected, rejected. And in order to overcome this, you need to let yourself be emotionally vulnerable and start to learn how to howl. I think every woman needs to learn how to howl. It's the most empowering, liberating feeling. Go into the woods and have a really good scream. Because you can save yourself from months or years or an entire lifetime of feeling blocked, hopeless, and stuck if you just let yourself release emotion without judgment. So clients that come to see me that are doing deep trauma work, this is a necessary part of their healing. Being able to express emotion is what is going to take the nervous system to a deeper level. You cannot ground beneath what you have not resolved and released. The nervous system will stay in the patterns to hold those protective, defensive layers. It will stay there until you're willing to go deeper into your heart and release the pain. You cannot just do body work and structural work to resolve illness and chronic conditions without going into the emotional processing part of this. It's actually more fundamental than working with the body. These emotions themselves live in the body. They live in the tissues. They vibrate through the nervous system. They vibrate through our fluids. They're there. We cannot pretend that they are not there. If we start to pretend they're not there, we start to pretend our body's not there. And then we start to become more and more disconnected and dissociated. And I'll talk about that in a separate podcast. I also want to talk about creating momentum. When you're stuck, you're looking for something big to happen. You're looking to be saved. You're looking to have a huge breakthrough. You're looking for something radically different to arrive. You are looking for a brand new house. You are looking for a promotion. You are looking for a holiday. And these big things are going to take you to the next level. These big things are going to finally make you feel free and in your flow. And the issue with that is when you're stuck, you don't have space to receive any of those things. You don't. You are keeping yourself small and then wondering why you feel so small. So in order to create momentum, these big things need to be broken down, right? First of all, doing the process that I've outlined is going to help you to create space within yourself. When you start to create space and you break down these big things that you're looking to happen, that you really want, you break them down into more bite-sized, more realistic, more practical pieces, then you can start to let yourself not only work towards it, but also receive it. And this is a process that generates a lot of momentum. So you start to realize that actually every day you're doing something that you're really passionate about. You're taking these small steps towards that bigger goal. And the more you do that every day, after several months, you've nailed it. It's starting to happen. Rather than just sitting and waiting and hoping that something is going to happen, something big is going to happen that's going to upgrade you and your life. Because it really, really doesn't work like that. And the longer you wait, the longer you become disappointed because you're not getting what you feel you deserve. So when you stay there for too long, you start to constrict even more, you make yourself even more small, you make yourself even more closed, and then that huge thing that you're really dreaming about becomes even further and further away. It becomes even more elusive. The frustration builds, the anger builds, the grief builds, etc., etc. So learning how to flow, learning how to break big things down, work on them each day, you will find you're building momentum very fast, and you'll be very, very pleased with yourself, and then pleased with what the outcome is. So one example is if you've got a goal of, okay, I'm going to eat healthy, but you actually don't really know what that means or how you're going to make time for that, or you know that your pattern is to fall back into emotional eating patterns, etc. And so you have all of this history with eating healthy. Instead of putting that on your to-do list or putting that as a New Year's resolution goal, you really want to say, instead, I'm going to put a to-do list together and I'm going to write, buy some spinach. Or I'm going to write, drink more water. Maybe not even drink more water. Maybe it's going to be drink 1 glass of water in the morning, because that's doable. And when you start to stack these aspects, these small little building blocks, you stack them, what you end up with is a really strong foundation. And it's actually quite fun and effortless to do it this way. So when I come across big challenges that I have to, that I either have to get through, work through, or I want to realize something and it's quite big, if it's too huge and I'm already feeling overwhelmed by the thought of, wow, how am I going to do that? I will break it down into as many components as I can, so that each component can be done in a few minutes. Because if you can do something in a few minutes, those minutes accumulate, and before you know it, you will have achieved your goal. Finally, recognize that being stuck is a sign that your old matrix is full of cobwebs and it's time to now create something new. When you accept that, you're going to have to do some soul searching, that inner work, that inner processing, that reflection on what has made you you, what has created your identity, and be radically honest with yourself. People who have been in this state for too long, for many, many years, will find it very difficult to do this process, because you're living it. You're too busy living it. You cannot disidentify from it. You cannot create space from it, right? You're drowning in it. So when someone tells you to stay calm and breathe, well, how can you? You're in it. So you need to seek help. You need to seek support and healing to allow you to do this with somebody that is going to help you to get some space, to start to analyze yourself, to start to self-reflect, to start to be honest, to start to recognize your true worth. So if you're listening to this and you know that you've been in this place for a while and you're ready to take action and make the steps that you need to go forward, and if you're really ready to do the deep inner work required to transform yourself at an identity level and recreate your reality, then you need to reach out to me and ask me for a chat so we can talk about what your healing path looks like. And the clients that do this and they come to me are absolutely astounded, because often they've spent lots and lots of money and many years doing other modalities, working with other therapists, trying everything and anything that's around, including plant medicines, including shamanic work and body work. And after all of that, they're still stuck. They're still holding the same vibration. Their heart is still in the same landscape and frequency. They're still haunted by the same things. They just have more cognitive self-awareness. They just know more. But their consciousness hasn't fundamentally changed, right? So ultimately, that's what's going to lead you into creating a new future for yourself, is when you actually change from the inside out. And the way I work is to get you very directly in touch with the root causes and give you the chance to make new choices, not through your mind, through your lived experience, through your body and through your energy field. These are where the patterns are held, and this is where the change starts to happen. So if this resonates with you and you want to work with me, please reach out. I have very, very limited spaces for one-to-one programs this year, and it will be an honor to help you on your journey. So feel free to get in touch. I hope this podcast was helpful, and if you have and you are trying this practice, let me know how it goes.